So this first video is just an introduction of our materials that we're going to be using these 4 weeks to paint our flowers. This is kind of a refresher course for those that have taken my classes before, but it's good to kind of go back to the basics, understand, kind of see the process early on. And for those of you that have never taken my classes before, then you'll be able to see ahead of time by watching this video, if you do this before our class starts on Saturday, to just kind of get you ready to understand how we're going to be working. So first, just to talk to you about our oil paints. This is how I lay out my paints every time on my palette. I just recommend that you get into the habit of laying out your paints the same exact way. It doesn't have to be the exact way that I do them, but develop it as a habit, because as you're in the middle of painting, you're going to need to reach up and pull out a color. And if you do it differently every single time, you're going to end up getting the wrong color. So do it like this, so it just becomes a habit. This is how we're going to lay out our paints these 4 weeks, just because this is how I lay out my palette. And then if you decide to change yours later on, that's perfectly up to you, but this is how we're going to be doing it. So I have our ultramarine blue, Viridian, we have the alizarin crimson, which is this very dark red, quinacridone red, naphthol red, or if you're using Winton paints, it would be Winton red, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, and white. I also have down here in this corner is our gel. So two things. One is our Gamsol, and I suggested that everybody have maybe just an empty little jelly jar, or you can get much better jars at Michael's or Ziegler's that make these wonderful containers where all of the, really it keeps your Gamsol much cleaner, as there's just a little filter up there. But you know, for the purposes of these next few weeks, something like this is perfectly fine. So Gamsol is a mineral spirit and is odorless. And what we use it for primarily is to initially thin out our paints when we do an underpainting. And then the rest of the time is really just for cleaning your brushes. So in the painting process, the only time we use the Gamsol is for thinning and the yellow ochre that we will be using for our underpainting, thinning that out, doing our underpainting. That's the only time that we use it in the process. After that, it's just to get the brushes clean. The other thing that we use is our solvent-free gel, and I have just a little glob of it down here in the corner on my palette. That's the other thing, is that I recommend you put your gel in the same spot. Again, just so you know, when you're needing gel, you need to reach for it where it's at. So as a disclaimer on the gel, I see a lot of students overusing gel. Gel is to help our paint get it just a little bit creamier so that it will flow a little bit better on our canvas. It also will help paint to adhere to each other as we're laying on more and more layers, but we don't want to overuse it. So we are going to use it mostly for what I call the first pass, as we're putting in, blocking in for our flowers. But after that, you don't need to use it as much. And when we do use it, get a paper towel here, I want you to take your brush, the end of your brush, and just kind of dip it in, barely dip it in like this, and then just wipe it like this. And then you scoop up your paint. I see a lot of students use too much of this. They'll get like a huge glob and then really saturate their brush with it, and then reach over for their paint. And then after a period of time, all of these paint colors are going to, they're all just going to blend in too much. So in oil painting, oil paints can become gray or dirty if there's too much blending of them. So it's just something to keep in mind. We really want to be careful. We don't want to put too much gel in there, because you're not going to like the outcome. Your paintings will be way too thin. Number one, it's going to thin out your paints way too much, which we don't want in oil painting. And then two, you're not going to see the brilliant colors. It's really going to delete all of the beautiful color that is in this paint. The more oil you put into a paint, then the less vibrant it is. So we just want to keep that in mind. The other thing is that, yes, we do want our first block in of paint to be thin. That's the goal. But our next passes of paint on top of that needs to be much thicker. So oil painting goes from thin to thick. The goal is at the very end of your painting that you see these nice, juicy strokes of paint that is really very textural and three-dimensional, and that's what you want to see in an oil painting. Okay, so now that we've talked about all of our tools that we're going to be, or our materials that we're going to be using, now I want to talk about paint mixing. So you all have a palette knife. I really like these palette knives because they're very, very flexible. And I really want to see people using your palette knife, pulling out your paint and using your palette knife to mix. I see a lot of people, and a lot of experienced artists, they just use a brush. They reach in, they pull it out, and they mix and then apply the paint to the canvas. And I think that if you're a real experienced painter, you can do that. But especially if you're a beginner, or you're just learning the process, or even intermediate artist, I really, and I only really use the palette knife to mix the majority of my paintings. So I really recommend it for anybody. But I guess my point is, while learning to paint, you really need to use a palette knife to mix your puddles of paint rather than a brush. What happens is, when you reach up and you pull out paint with your brush, and then you go to another color and pull it out, well, you're getting, number one, you're getting, say we do this with red and then yellow ochre. You're going to get some red off of your brush into the yellow ochre. So you're just going to dilute this yellow ochre. Again, with oil paints, the more these colors start blending in together, the grayer they're going to look. So we want to keep our paints clean, and in order to do that, we have to use a palette knife to mix our paint colors. So I wanted to demonstrate how we mix our colors. We're going to be starting color studies this week, And I'm going to demo in our next video the colors, how we're going to be doing our color study starting Saturday. But this is the flower, one of our flowers that we'll be doing a study on. And I want to go ahead and mix the paints for you, mix the colors for you so you can see exactly how I mix the paints. So I'm going to be, for our studies, we're going to start out with just 2 values for the very, very first part of our 4-part study. It's just 2 values. It's going to be a dark and a mid-tone. It will not be the very deepest dark, like you see these really darks here. These are, right along here. We're not going to start out with that. We're going to start out more of this dark along here and along here. Then we're going to mix kind of a mid-tone light. So it's going to be this color around here, but not the lightest light. So we're not going to start with the darkest dark or the lightest light. Because with oil paints, if you go too light early on, you're going to fight to drop down in value. Oil paints do not want to go too dark in value if you start out too light. So if we start with more of a mid-tone on our very first block in, then it's easier to go up into the light. Same thing with our darks. If I started out with, if I took this deep dark color right here and I used it for, say, all of this dark here and all of this dark along here, then I'm going to be fighting this deep dark as I am painting. And so again, it's hard. If you go too dark, you're going to be fighting it to get a little bit lighter. And if you go to your lightest light, you'll be fighting it to go down. So really, we're going to stay in the middle for our very first pass on our study, and also as we do when we first do our paintings. So that being said, I'm going to show you how I'm going to mix a dark and kind of a mid-tone color to start with. So I'm going to pull out some alizarin crimson. Now we're going to try, hopefully we can get in the time, to do our first and second passes on our studies this week. So when you mix your paint, you want to have enough paint to be able to use for both of these little studies. So I'm going to mix these darks with alizarin crimson. So I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to get some more. I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to put it here. I'm going to wipe off, that's the other thing, wipe off your palette knife in between pulling off colors. I cannot emphasize enough, keep our paints clean. So we wipe off our palette knife, okay? Then I'm going to reach up to my quinacridone red and I'm going to pull that out. Now what I'm trying to do here in this dark is I'm trying to go 50-50. Now, I know I'm not a mathematician. I'm an artist. So I can't tell you this is going to be exact 50-50, but just, it's good to understand or hear what the ratio is, just so in your head when you're mixing these, you can eyeball it and know what you're going for. So I'm going to put this here. Now then, I'm going to take my palette knife. I'm going to scoop it, both of these paints like this, and then I'm going to press it down. scoop it again, and press it down. So don't be shy with really mixing these hard. Again, I see a lot of students just kind of barely, a little afraid of the paints and just barely touching like this. That's not going to mix your color. In fact, I see too many students that don't flip their palette knife back and forth like that and put pressure on it. Scoop it like this, turn this over, and with pressure, press it down. Scoop it again and press it down. And you'll see as you're mixing, you'll see, why this is needed, because you'll see some of these colors I got a little bit left here, then I need to put more in. You'll see the need for really, really pressing that down. Okay, got some runaway white paint coming down here. All right. Okay. So that is a dark tone that we're going to be using to start out with. Now I'm going to do kind of a mid-tone. So I'm going to take, again, it's really a 50-50 of both of these. Scrape it and press it. Turn it over, scrape it and press it. Now then, wiping off my palette knife, I'm going to reach up and I'm going to grab some yellow ochre. The reason why I'm doing that is I'm going to be going up in value. See, these are darks, dark valued paint colors here, kind of mid-tone paint colors here, and then lighter colors up here. So as we go up to lighter values, then we use some lighter, some paints that are of lighter value. The other reason why I'm using yellow ochre is because this quinacridone red is a very beautiful color, and I use it so much for my flowers. But if you use it just alone without mixing a little bit of the yellow ochre in it, then it's going to get kind of a Pepto-Bismol color to it, which we're not going for. So by using the yellow ochre, it calms that down a bit. Yellow ochre it leans to the green. We're going to be talking a lot about complementary colors, but if you think of yellow ochre really as a light green, green is a complementary color to red. So when you mix a complementary color with each other, they will gray each other down. So that's why I use a little bit of yellow ochre. Now, I may need more of that, and I will know after I put some white into this mix. So now I'm going to reach up and I'm going to get a little bit of white. Now I want you to see that I'm not going for my lightest light here. So I'm going to be real careful about how much white I'm going to be adding to this mix, because I don't want it to be this very light part that we're seeing on this petal. That will come later. I don't want to start with it. So I'm going to, I think I'll probably go just a bit more. I think I'll have just a bit more white into that. And I might also put just a little bit more of this yellow ochre in it. And then a bit more white. Let's see what I have there. See how I scrape it and turn it over and see how you can see these streaks of white there? You want that mixed in, because when you start applying your paint, when it's streaky, you're not going to like it. It's not going to look good. We don't want streaky strokes of paint. So that's why we mix with our palette knife really, really good before we start painting. So see that, the white there? Press on it. That. Okay, so I think I'm going to start with these two values, kind of middle range, a dark and a mid-tone for our flower. Secondly, we're also going to mix for this background, or what we call negative space. This is positive space. This is negative space. So down here, I have my Viridian. This is actually, I will tell you, this is actually a phthalo green. It's just what I have today. And it's a wonderful paint. There's phthalo blues, greens, there's a whole range of them, but they are very, very, very chromatic or vibrant. And they're what I call a bossy paint. They boss all of the other paints around. Terrible in the schoolyard, they don't play well. And so I think for classes, I really don't want students to be using a phthalo. You can add it to your palette later on, but for the purposes of these classes, we're not going to do that because because they are so bossy, so vibrant. When it comes to mixing, you have to be really, really careful about mixing them with other paints because it can definitely be a challenge. So that being said, you all will have the Viridian, and I'm right now using this phthalo green. So to make my dark, and this is a very, very dark background, I have this phthalo green, which I do not want to use by itself because it would be way too chromatic. So I am going to put a little bit of this naphtha red in it. So we have kind of maybe a 70-30 ratio, something like that. Maybe even less than that. It may be like a 75-25, something like this. So something I want to say is, we're doing this, number one, because this red is a complementary color to green. And when you mix complementary colors together, they will gray down the other. So it takes out all of that vibrant color, that you want to be careful and not mix too much. So this, I'm a little concerned if this is, maybe I put a little bit too much red into this. What happens is that if you put too much of the complementary color, and this is the other thing that I think is really important for students, especially when it comes to mixing, if you put too much of the complementary color in, then you're going to get brown. If you do 50-50 then of 2 paints that are complementary color, that really is just a brown. Now that will vary some because like phthalo, some paints are they're bossier and they're much more chromatic, but just keep in mind, you don't want to go like a 50-50 mixture unless you are trying to get a brown, and that could make a beautiful brown, but that's not what we're going for. We're just wanting to take some of this chroma out of this green. So I just put some of the naphthol red in it. Now I'm going to reach up and I'm going to grab some of this yellow ochre. And I'm doing this because it will lighten it just a little bit. It's still pretty dark. I'll probably put a little bit more in it. So remember, I'm going up into value, so I reach up to the yellow ochre. I'm going to pull out some more. And that will give us this nice green for a background, but not too dark. Not too dark yet. Remember, in these first 2 block ends, or at least the first block end, we're not going too dark. So we have that for our dark, our background, and then I had already had a pile down here, and this is, show you, I'll take some Viridian. Probably not going to grab as much because it's not going to be as dark. I'm not mixing it with the red because I don't want it, again, with complementary colors, not only does it neutralize the other paint, but it also it brings the value of it down. So rather than going to red, I'm just going to go directly into my yellow ochre, and I'm going to be using more of it. So my ratio of my green with my yellow ochre is going to be more like a 60-40, something like that. And then I'm going to also wiping off my palette knife. Now I'm going to come up to my cadmium yellow because I do want to get it a little bit lighter. So I think that these 2 values are dark and kind of a middle tone green will be really good to start our studies. I also want to tell you that, you know, if you look at this background, its majority of it is a dark. So this may very well be, in fact, it will be. We'll stay with this. We will not go lighter for our background for this particular flower because it's just not there. We just don't have any lights there in it. Okay, so this is as far as we're going to do about talking about our supplies, mixing our paints, and then our next video we're going to start our color study.